Welcome back to another episode of the Rants of a Red Devil podcast. We are at episode 6. Thank you ever so much for tuning in to this episode and any previous episodes that you may have listened to. Today is going to be a little bit different. It's not going to be as United focused, but don't worry, we'll try and get some transfer gossip in at the end regarding United from this week. But today we're going to look at the Premier League's Project Restart. So that's the big news of the last week, and from the Premier League meeting, it has been reported that the option of null and void to the season, much to the delight of the Scousers, has been completely removed. That will not happen. So one way or another, we will have a league decided either by playing the remaining games, or on a points per game basis. To me, it stinks. That idea stinks of wealth over health. It's all about the money. Obviously, the Premier League, there's a lot of money involved. It's reported that the Premier League would owe broadcasters, BT, Sky and foreign broadcasters, somewhere in the region of £300 to £700 million if the season is not completed. The sort of idea of it's all about money becomes obvious when youth level Premier Leagues and things like that have been cancelled because there's not the money involved in it. And this one, we are still waiting to see what happens, purely because of the money involved in the Premier League. It's been reported as well, a government official, I don't know who it was, has said that football could be used to lift the morale of the nation. Obviously these are unprecedented times. We probably could all do with a lift, and we'd all love, any football loving male or female would love to see football back. If I was a Premier League footballer though, I have a bit of an issue with this, and my issue is Matt Hancock at the start of this absolutely slated footballers. Sort of said that they should be donating money, dictating effectively how they spent their wage. If I was a footballer now, if I was a Premier League footballer, and this government came to me and said, with your help, we'd love to have you lift the morale of the nation, I'd be telling them which stretch of M6 to go and play on, because you can't slate somebody and then expect them to do you a favour weeks later. It just doesn't. That's not how things work. There's a lot of opposition to a Project Restart, and the whole idea of using football to lift the morale of the nation is one that has sort of upset Danny Rose. Obviously Danny Rose is never one too far away from an opinion and a comment, and fair play to him for that. It's not a pop at Danny Rose. We don't swear on the show, but Danny Rose has said that he doesn't give an F about the nation's morale. People's lives are at risk, and a return of football should only be considered when coronavirus cases have dropped massively and it is safe to do so. Can't really argue with Danny Rose on that one. Safety is obviously the main concern. That's been echoed by Aguero. I think we've touched on it before on this show, that Aguero lives with his elderly in-laws, and he's concerned for their safety, which again is fair enough considering the government have told us all along that we need to protect those that are vulnerable, that are high risk, and that includes the more elderly in society. The latest opponent, shall we say, to Project Restart is Watford captain Troy Deeney. He was told at a Premier League meeting that returning to training would be safer than going to the supermarket. Deeney's response was he had a choice when he went to a supermarket. So those comments from Deeney seem to suggest to me that players feel that they are potentially being forced into a return when they're not ready. Nobody should be forced to work in conditions that are unsafe. And the whole idea that players could be potentially being forced to return is echoed when the Premier League have made comments along the lines of threatening wage cuts if the season is not started, whether that's short-term wage cuts or permanent wage cuts. It hasn't been clarified, but the idea has been floated that there will be wage cuts if this season is not restarted, if Project Restart doesn't go ahead. So that sort of echoes Deeney's comment that players are being forced into a decision here. And I'm not a fan of that. There's more obviously issues along the line. We touched on the issues with broadcasters and the funds that would have to be repaid if a season was cancelled. There's also a long list of legal battles if a season's cancelled. So if we cancel the season and we award Liverpool the title, we put the little asterisk next to it, whatever it might be, we've then obviously got to relegate teams, but we can't relegate teams based on not playing their full quota of games, because teams could get out of it, teams could drop into it, who knows what would have happened. And then we've got obviously the issue with West Brom and Leeds that are all but certain for promotion. What do we do? The Premier League opens themselves up to issues if they don't come up. They've pretty much earned it, the same as Liverpool have pretty much earned the title. But if we give Liverpool the title, we have then got to promote. We've then got to promote West Brom and Leeds, but you can't relegate teams based on not playing their full quota of fixtures. So then the idea is toyed of having a 22 or 23 league season to avoid those legal battles. So we don't relegate any teams, but we promote 2 or 3 teams from the Championship. The issue that creates is fixture congestion. So that's already an issue. Fixture congestion is already an issue in the league. We are aware of fixture congestion being an issue, especially over Christmas, when we play a daft number of games in a short amount of days. How are we going to fit? If they promote, say, 3 teams and don't relegate anybody, we then have a 23 team league. We've then got to fit an extra 6 games per team into that league season. We don't have the room for the games that we've got now. How are we fitting 6 more games per team into that calendar? The only way that I can think is we end the Carabao Cup. We're the only league, we're the only country in Europe, the only major country in Europe to have 2 domestic cup competitions, the FA Cup and the Carabao Cup. So we potentially end the Carabao Cup. But then what you do, that's a payday for lesser teams in lower divisions. If you draw yourself home or away against a Man United, it's a payday. It's a payday for that club. So we effectively remove their chance of paydays. So we punish the lesser clubs, in quotes, those lesser clubs, to benefit the wealthier clubs. Doesn't sit right, does it? There's also been talk of neutral venues. That's been a big one. Obviously, all games being played behind closed doors for obvious reasons at neutral venues. The whole idea of the neutral venue is obviously to stop fans appearing. But for instance, if they use the Midlands as a hub, that has been talked about, with obviously Villa Park, St Andrews, the Ricoh Arena, various other stadiums in the Midlands. If we use that as the hub to host this Project Restart, what's stopping fans just gathering outside anyway? It's an hour and a half from Manchester to Birmingham, and there's nothing on the road because nobody's going anywhere. It's coronavirus has stopped that. So yeah, you can make it in an hour and a half straight into Birmingham. What's stopping the fans standing outside the ground? hoping to get in. There's nothing stopping it. Especially for, and I'm not singling them out just because of who they are, but Liverpool, set to obviously lift their first domestic league title in 30 years. That is right, 30 years. What's stopping their fans going down to whatever neutral ground it's going to be played at, standing outside the ground on the hope that they can sneak in and see their team lift the trophy, or standing outside the ground in the hope that they see their team leaving with the trophy? There's nothing stopping it. So what's the idea of neutral venues? For me, if neutral venues have to be used, we have to start asking, is it really safe to restart this season? I'll let you make your own minds up on that. But the other thing that they've talked about is potential rule changes. So things like 5 substitutions instead of 3. This one's genuine as well. This one is genuine. You've probably seen it online. Turning your head in a challenge to avoid the spread of the disease. I'll come back to if we have to turn our heads when we're making or being tackled, is it really safe? But for me, I mean, the rule changes. You can't start a season with one set of rules and then end it with a completely different set. You can't do that. It's moving the goalposts halfway, 3/4 of a way through a season. You can't do that. You've got to start and end with the same set of rules. People can talk about the league being completed for integrity purposes. For me, integrity, there's more integrity in keeping the same set of rules and deciding a league season based on the same set of rules than there is just finishing a season. The integrity goes out the window when you start moving the goalposts. I think the Premier League are looking at the situation in Germany. Obviously, the Bundesliga started again this weekend. And I think the Premier League are looking at that situation and thinking, well, if they can get that going, why can't we get the Premier League going? The situation's different. Germany's a bigger country. It's not been hit as hard by this virus. And I won't get into the politics of why that is. That's for another podcast. But they have dealt with the situation better than we have in England. So I think we're potentially looking at that and comparing it, but the problem is it's not a comparable situation. They're a bigger country that haven't been hit as hard. That's like saying that ferry cruise liner can cross the channel, so I can do it on a pedalo. It's not comparable. It isn't the same. The Bundesliga has been able to start because Germany have not been hit by this pandemic or dealt with this pandemic better than we have here. And that's why they've been able to start. And even they're not without their issues in the Bundesliga. Obviously, Dynamo Dresden, they're in quarantine at the moment as players tested positive before the season kicked off again. What happens if that happens here? Obviously, a few players in a squad get coronavirus and have to quarantine for 2 weeks. But then because we've stuck them all in one central hub in the Midlands, a couple of squad members from another team get it, and another team and another team. What happens then? Do we postpone it a little bit longer until they're all fit? Do they just not play? Do they have to do without? Do they get docked points? What happens? And I think we need to look at how much do we impact next season just to finish this one. It's probably inevitable to say that we're going to get a second, third, potentially fourth, fifth peak of this virus. It's going to strike us again. We're not going to get away with this scot-free. Have they taken that into consideration? So say we manage to get this season finished by August, September, whenever it may be, and we start the new one in, say, October. But then we get a second peak and we're all in lockdown by December for 2 or 3 months. So you've played October, November of your new season. You're in lockdown December, January, February. Well, what do you do about starting the season? Because you've only had 2 months of it. Do you scrap that one? Do you scrap the entirety of that one and that one doesn't exist? I think at some point there has to be a line drawn. How much do we start impacting future seasons just to get this one finished? And personally, I'll probably take some criticism for what I'm about to say, but it is what it is. If there were a different team sat at the top of the Premier League other than Liverpool, I do not believe there would be this clamour to finish this season. personal opinion. But we have to look at how much we impact future seasons just to get this one finished. I mean, hopefully, like we touched at the start, the legal issues. Hopefully this is just the Premier League protecting itself. Hopefully this is just the Premier League preparing for a legal battle, and when they appear in front of whatever court they appear in front of, with whatever broadcasting company or club that is appearing alongside them, they can turn around and say, we did all we could to get this season finished. We didn't even toy with the idea of null and void. So the first Premier League meeting minutes, you'll probably find it was never mentioned. Second one, never mentioned. Third one, any additional business. What about if we have to null and void this season? That's probably how it's gone. Hopefully the Premier League are just protecting themselves, trying to portray that they're doing all that they can to get this Premier League season finished for legal purposes. Now, I mean, you might say that I'm only saying that because of who's sitting at the top of the league, but that certainly isn't the case. We've got just as much to lose if this season doesn't continue. We're in the hunt for the FA Cup with favourites to lift the Europa League. If this pandemic hadn't have started and there was no break in football, I genuinely believe that we would have overtaken Chelsea for that third spot. So we've got a lot riding on this season as well. But I think when we look at it, safety has to be paramount, and that safety of the players and everybody associated with football. The safety has to be paramount. And like I say, hopefully it's just the Premier League protecting itself and preparing for a legal battle in the future. But that's enough of Project Restart. Let's just touch on some transfer gossip. We'll look at the ins first, and then we'll look at the outs. So the ins, obviously there's been a lot of talk made of Jadon Sancho. We've been pretty vocal on this show and on our site about Jadon Sancho and the admiration for him, and that he pretty much perfectly fits the system. We've been crying out for a right winger for about a decade, and Jadon Sancho fits that bill. He fits what we're trying to build, young, English. So he perfectly fits that bill. But this week we've seen the first talk of a backup to Jadon Sancho should the deal fail to materialise. It's Robbie Montado, I think that's how you pronounce it, from Schalke. He's a young Welsh player that obviously Giggs has had a lot to do with, and I know that Giggs has obviously had a word with Solskjaer about Dan James, hence why we signed him. He had a word with Solskjaer about the centre-back, is it Joe Rodon, that we're potentially looking at signing. So Giggs is being pretty... is having a pretty big impact on signings and potential targets for United and Solskjaer. Obviously, Solskjaer wanted to build this mainly British core of players. It helps to have Giggs available to tap into that. I watched the Dortmund Schalke game yesterday in the hopes of seeing Jadon Sancho and potentially Matondo. But Sancho didn't really play because he'd picked up a knock, and Matondo came on at half time. But Schalke were that poor, he didn't really have an impact in the game. I mean, hopefully it's just paper talk, and they're trying to fill back pages, and hopefully the Jadon Sancho deal's still going ahead as we all anticipated it would. But it worries me a little bit for the first time we're seeing a what if it doesn't happen. So we've gone from it basically being done, all that's left to do is sign the paperwork, to what if it doesn't happen. And that's what concerns me a little bit. That I'm glad that we've got a backup option, because I was very vocal before about what happens if Sancho doesn't happen, we haven't got a backup. I'm glad we've got a backup, but I'm a little bit concerned that now we're talking about potentially this deal might not happen. One that does look to have happened though is Bellingham. Obviously United pulled out all the stops when he came to Carrington. They wheeled Sir Alex out to show him round. It looks like that's sealed. It looks like he favours a move to United over Dortmund, which would be fantastic, because at 16 or 17 he's a hell of a player already. by the time he hits 23, 24, he's going to be an absolute beast. So if that one is sealed, that'll be incredible. Another one apparently sealed, Moussa Dembele from Lyon, 61 or 62.8 million euros. Obviously, again, fits that mould. Young, mobile striker. Haven't seen a lot of him. Obviously, know he's talked about a lot in Europe, and he scored a lot of goals in France. But I don't know how similar he is to Martial. And obviously, if we're looking at bringing in Dembele, it potentially spells the end of Ighalo, who was very different to Martial. He offered something completely different, as we saw in that last City game. His hold-up play was absolutely incredible. So it'll be a shame to see him go. Another one is Raul Jimenez. This is one that sort of United are linked with Jimenez, then it goes quiet. Then United are linked with Jimenez, then it goes quiet. Then United are linked with Jimenez, then it goes quiet. We've been linked with Jimenez again. He's obviously a fantastic striker, scores plenty of goals, Premier League experience. Doesn't really fit what Solskjaer's going for with that young core of players. He's 29, so he's coming toward the end. Toward the end, do you know what I mean, of his career. He's not at that raw early 20s stage that we've seemed to have looked at so far. Jadon Sancho, Dembele, Bruno Fernandes, not at that sort of stage. He's past that point of his career. Obviously, he scores goals in the Premier League, so it would be a great addition if he was to come in. Another one that looks like it could have been done is Saul Niguez from Atletico Madrid. Now, I'm a big fan of Saul. I've watched a lot of Spanish football, and I'm a big fan of Saul. He reminds me of Ander Herrera. He's tenacious. He gets himself about the park, but he's got that little added quality, and that's no knock to Herrera, because I love Herrera. I think he's a fantastic footballer. I thought he was a fantastic player for United. But Saul's got that little bit of extra quality on the ball. So to get that sort of scurrying midfielder back in the side, but with that little bit more quality, I think it'd be a fantastic bit of business. Apparently, Atletico Madrid have been hit pretty hard by the coronavirus pandemic, and a deal has been agreed in the region of 70 million for Saul. So again, considering he's got like 130 million release clause, that could be a cracking bit of business if that is the case, and United have sealed it. There's a few various outlets reporting that it is done, so that would be great if that is done. Now looking at the outs, obviously the one that's rumbled on quite a lot is the Angel Gomez. Contract was put in front of him months ago and it still hasn't been signed. We're in a similar situation to the situation we were with Pogba with Angel Gomez at the moment. And United are in a bit of a tough spot as to what to do. Obviously, we let Pogba go and then spent vast sums of money bringing him back. So do we really want to get to a point where we're doing that with Angel Gomez? Probably not. But do we want to be held to ransom by a youth player that's not playing? Obviously, the game time has been an issue for him in terms of stalling on the contract. And to me, that's not the only reason he's not playing. Chong didn't sign the contract straight away, still got minutes. To me, there's something a little bit deeper with Angel Gomez as to why he's not playing. And I think that Ollie's seen something, Ollie and his staff have seen something, and I trust Ollie and his staff. He's apparently, Angel Gomez, it's been reported, he's concerned about his path to the first team, with United looking at similar age players in similar positions to he plays. Now, to me, if you've got the elite mentality required to make it at Man United, you have that mentality that no matter who you put in my way, no matter what obstacles you put up for me, I will make it at this football club. If Angel Gomez is concerned about a bit of competition, is he really good enough to be at United? He should revel in the competition and say, well, I'm just going to come out on top of it all. He's linked with a move to Chelsea, where there's even less of a pathway into the first team. Obviously, they've played youth this year because they've sort of been forced to. They've they've obviously with the transfer embargo, they've had to play young players and then act like they're the first club that's ever done it. But historically, that route into the first team for a youth team player at Chelsea isn't as easy as it is at United. United develop youth, United give youth a chance. If he can't make it at United, and there's serious doubts about obviously the mentality that he has to make it at United, should we let him go? I mean, he's, like I say, his potential is fantastic. I watched him in the youth team and he was absolutely incredible. But I don't want to see us being held to ransom by a player that's not playing for a reason. And finally, you thought we were going to get through a transfer segment without talking about Pogba? You are wrong. Paul Pogba. News has broken this morning from L'Équipe in France that Pogba is close to sealing a move back to Juventus, with Rabiot being used as part of that deal. Just no. No. I want Rabiot as far away from Manchester United as physically possible. He had a chance to join us before he went to Juventus from PSG. Didn't. So he doesn't really want to play for us. He's a player that brings issues off the field. He's bringing issues currently at Juventus. Part of the reason for people wanting Pogba gone is the issues he brings off the field. Pogba's world class. Why would we get rid of a world class player that brings issues off the field to replace him with a player that's not world class but brings issues off the field? Pogba divides fans like no other player that I've ever seen at Man United. I can understand why fans want him to go. He hasn't really seemed dedicated to the club. He's never come out and squashed rumours. He's never come out and told Mino Raiola to shut his mouth. And he's probably only had, I can count on one hand, the number of good games he's had for United in the years that he's been there. But on the other hand, as we've said, he's world class. Ask the fans at Juventus. Ask the French public. Pogba is world class. But I think we've been looking at him wrong. When we signed Pogba, I thought he was going to be a little bit like Roy Keane in the sense that he got the ability to drag us through games when we were struggling. When we needed that little bit of tenacity, that little bit of something, he would provide it. I don't think he's that player. The more I've looked at him and the more I've thought about it, I don't think he's that sort of player. At Juventus, he had quality around him. He was playing next to Pirlo. For France, he's got quality all around him. He's got Griezmann. He's got whoever else that French to filled with quality. He's got it all around him for France, and he thrives. At United, he's never really had that quality. He's never really had those world-class players around him. Bar Marcus Rashford, Pogba's the only one that you could argue is world-class at United. Whether that changes putting Bruno Fernandes next to him, who knows, we might wait and see. But I think with better players around him, Bruno Fernandes, Marcus Rashford fit, Anthony Martial on his day, Jadon Sancho, Saul, putting those sort of players around him, I think we start to see the best of Paul Pogba. And that's obviously all the fans want. They want to see the best of Paul Pogba. I wouldn't want to see him go for any sort of player being used as a make-weight in a deal. If Pogba was to leave, I want Juventus or Real Madrid to come along, put £150 million on the table and say, we'll take Pogba off your hands, you take that. Because that to me is what it takes to move him. I don't want any other player that's not deemed good enough to play at Juventus or Real Madrid. Don't want those players. If they're not good enough there, they're not good enough for United. If Pogba goes, it can only be a cash deal. We'll see what happens with him. I'm sure, like last time, it's going to rumble on until a transfer window opens and then closes if he doesn't move straight away. We'll soon see what happens with that one, as we will with all of the other transfer targets that we've or rumours that we've discussed. That's pretty much time to wrap up the episode today. Thank you for tuning in. The podcasts are available on iTunes, on Spotify, on our website and on YouTube. wherever it is that you listen to these podcasts, if you could subscribe on that platform, it really helps us out and we'd really appreciate it. You can check out more United news, these podcasts, previous episodes, as well as written articles on our website, rantsofareddevil.com. Check us out on Twitter for Breaking United News. We try to get it out as quick as possible, at RantDevil, if you want to follow us on Twitter. And until next time, thank you for tuning in.